Thank you all for coming out here this morning. If you're not from Atlanta, I hope you're enjoying the traffic and the aquarium, which is a beautiful place. So first of all, I just want to, we have a lot to talk about. We only have 40 minutes, as you all know. So I'm going to let the panel introduce themselves. Then we're going to get into a nice, brisk conversation about some good stuff. And let's start. Let's start with Kitty. Well, okay, just start.
Carlene, hey, how y'all doing?
I'm kind of discombobulated because I got to put
Good morning. My name is Carlene Gordon. I'm the Senior Vice President and the Diversity and Inclusion Officer at Ameris Bank. I have been in the HR DEI space for around 25 years. I know, that can't tell, I know.
Hi, I'm Kitty Chaney-Reed. I am the Chief Leadership, Culture, and Inclusion Officer at the IBM Corporation. I've been with IBM for about 7 years, and I love this work.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Cheryl Kern. I'm Vice President of DEIB at Miller Knoll, previously Herman Miller, the furniture company. And I've been involved in diversity in different facets, from supplier diversity to community engagement for 15 years. And joined the company 3 years ago.
Hi everyone, I'm Liz Pittinger. I come from Stork Club, which is a family building and reproductive health care company providing benefits to employee groups. And I am the VP of Customer Success. So I've been working with HR leaders, managing your relationships with your vendor, and helping you specifically focus on ways to design benefits in a technologically efficient way.
Hi everyone, I'm Kristen Taylor. I am blessed to be on the leadership team with Avenica. Our mission at Avenica is essentially to connect talent to opportunity. Think of it like first job, next job, dream job. And I have been in the diversity and inclusion space for about 12 years, primarily in commercial real estate, which is about 85% white men if you're not familiar. And definitely an uphill battle sometimes. And we specialize in all sorts of things from the very early in career to executive in commercial real estate, retail, insurance, finance, so on and so forth.
All right, so let's get started. So Kitty, you said you love this work.
I do.
And I'm sure everyone loves this work. Let's get into some historical context. Some companies have been focused on inclusion for a lot longer than the last few years. Tell us a bit about IBM's history and how that's working in the regard of all that.
So IBM has a long history that dates back to the 50s of driving systemic change through inclusivity. And I think all of you can relate to the fact that this is not a one and done type of endeavor. So we have really endeavored to make certain that systemically we create opportunities for all, and that we look at this from the perspective of innovation, creativity, and also how we bring to the workplace people who are comfortable being their authentic selves, and also how we open up opportunities through avenues that are not what I would consider traditional. We look at how we upskill talent. We look for talent in non-traditional places. And we're doing that we were talking earlier about impact. So we're doing that in ways that we actually make commitments and make impacts. And so our commitments, some of our commitments are our commitment to skill or upskill 30 million people by 2030 in areas of technology. And then the other thing we're doing is we've spent and have committed to spend $250 million with apprenticeships and internships and returnships to really create opportunity in places that are non-traditional. The other thing we do is we ensure that a college degree is not a barrier to entry at IBM. And 50% of our jobs over the last, I would say, 3 years have been de-scoped as requiring a college degree. So 50% of our jobs are jobs that can be obtained without a college degree. Now, we are always going to look for the most talented and competitive talent in the marketplace. I believe we do that really well. And again, we're doing that with an eye on inclusivity for all of the right reasons to bring the best talent to the workplace.
Cheryl, I saw you were nodding your head. Does that coincide with what you're dealing with at your place?
It really does, and I was also reflecting on our history and our journey and how we've arrived at where we are today, although you never really ultimately arrive. It is, to Kitty's point, just an ongoing body of work. But there's a gentleman named DJ Dupree, and he was one of the founders of Herman Miller. We are now Miller No. We've merged No and Herman Miller to become a new company a few years ago. And Mr. Dupree, who was born in the late 1800s, died in 1990, so he lived to be almost 100, had an awakening early into the founding of then Herman Miller when he went out on the manufacturing floor and started to spend a lot more time with the employees. And you can go out and read one of his famous quotes where he says, "We can look at people as ordinary or we can look at people as extraordinary. The choice is up to us." Mm-hmm. And it was from then on that he really began to drive a culture. Think way back to when he was in the business. If you think we have a predominantly majority population in the workplace today, back then I'm sure it was 100% majority people. And so think about how radical that probably was back then for him to begin to move the company towards this people-centric focus, which has really remained with us over the years. Take that up to about 15 years ago, where we really began to more formally structure strategies and systems to really, kind of propel our work. And that brings us to where we are today, where we're global in scope, we have a strong infrastructure, we have commitment from the top of the house, mm-hmm. and we have a lot of different measurements that are in place to drive the accountability. So we've had quite a long legacy along the way that's really been steeped from the founders to the progress we're making today.
Okay, before we get into the really deep discussion, I really love that first question, which I asked. So I want to ask each of you to answer that. Then we're going to get into some of the backlash and all this stuff. So Carlin, tell about your company's history and what you guys are doing.
So Ameris Bank was founded 50 years ago in a small town, Moultrie, Georgia, right? And I've been with the company for 5.5 years. And the reason why I was hired was the idea that we needed to become more diverse intentionally, and we needed to create more strategy, not just the administration, not the tactical work. How do we create the strategy of making our people have that sense of belonging and creating real opportunities? My goal is, how do I reduce the barriers of access? Because if you are not intentionally creating a reduction of how people can interact and how we are creating the culture of inclusion and equity, I always say the work is the inclusion and equity work that can lead to the diverse and the sense of belonging that you want in your people mm-hmm. and in the communities that you're serving. So when I came on board, the first thing that I found came on board in the DEI role was the CEO wanted to talk to me. Mm-hmm. The board members wanted to talk to me. Mm-hmm. And they wanted to make sure I was aware of the commitment that they had when it comes to the work that I'm gonna be doing and the strategies that we're gonna be putting in place. So when you have that type of, support on your back, you feel really empowered, y'all. And so when you are going out and you may get some people who are maybe resistant, it's nice to be able to have the knowledge that the lead independent board director is in your phone and he's telling you, keep doing the good work. Mm-hmm. It's nice to have the CEO, he's a text away, so if you have a question, he can say yes. And when I receive roadblocks, he'll say, drop my name, Carlene. I'm like, I'm gonna drop it. So I say all that to say is, even though it may seem like we're newer to the game, the truth of the matter is this is work that we've been doing, we just now have titles with it. And because we have the titles with it, you have to use your influence and those titles for the greater good of those in your organization and in the communities that you're serving.
All right. Liz, talk about the Stork Club.
Yeah, so it's interesting. Stork Club is a family building and reproductive health care benefit that you can provide to your employees. And the reason that we even exist is because traditional medical coverage will often require an infertility diagnosis before anyone can access that care. Well, so what does that mean for a 32-year-old single woman who knows one day she wants to have a family, but she's not ready right now, she doesn't have a partner, whatever the case may be? Doing elective egg freezing for that woman, she's excluded from the coverage that would allow her to be able to do that in a financially sound way. Where does that leave same-sex couples? Where does that leave your adoption and surrogacy policy? So what we've done is we've created this end-to-end solution where we provide inclusive benefits all the way from fertility preservation, trying to get pregnant and start a family now, pregnancy care with in-person birthing doulas, postpartum care, back to work coaching, all the way through to the hormonal therapies that we experience, menopause, low T, and gender affirming care. And so being able to provide that inclusive benefit design, that's where we're supporting HR organizations to achieve your greater strategic goals.
Christian?
I'm just obsessed with that. I'm sorry. I was telling you that earlier. I just love that. Avenica, we actually recently sold our company Arch to Avenica. And one of the reasons why we felt it made sense was their commitment to diversity. And you were talking about I guess using your influence, and it's what I call your position of power. We are headhunters. We specialize in connecting talent to the right opportunity, like I mentioned. So I'm a CDR. Everybody on my team is a certified diversity recruiter. But on the early and career side, which is actually what Avenica has specialized in for the past several decades, what better way to inject diversity in the right way than in early in careers programs. So what we've done is we've actually built a proprietary system. It's called Halo. There are 22 personas, but instead of the traditional personality assessment, we really focus on the preferences of the talent. So, there are questions in there that are like, do you like to have coffee in the morning, or do you prefer to go on a walk? Like things like that. And that helps us really map them to the right opportunity, to the right culture. And about 62% of our 3,000 careers that we've launched they identify as BIPOC. So we're really proud of that.
So before we came out here, Kristen said that she was very nervous about talking.
Sorry. Can you tell? I'm shaking.
As you can see, we're like all wrapped in what she's talking about. But I want to keep going with you right here, because the increasing open conversation about neurodiversity is a welcome change. You have experience both personally and professionally. So can you talk a little bit about that and how that all works and what we're talking about?
Absolutely. I think.
And for those of you who don't know, what neurodiversity is.
Absolutely. So neurotypical, I suppose, is the default. But neurodivergence, you can think of folks that maybe identify as being on the spectrum, ADHD, OCD. I'm bipolar. And that does not mean that I'm unpredictable or I run around the streets if I'm unmedicated. It's absolutely not the case. I just get really sad sometimes. And I do struggle with things like this, public speaking and networking and things like that. I just get really nervous. So thank you for making me feel so comfortable, everybody. Appreciate it. So one of the reasons, again, why I felt like it made sense to sell our company to Avenica is I was speaking with the CEO, and what do you know? He's neurodivergent. And what do you know? One of our team members is also neurodivergent. And how fabulous is it that we can all be our authentic selves and really feel like we can articulate our needs and our preferences, which is why we built that Halo assessment. I have my fabulous head of sales here, Chris. I don't know where you are, Chris, but he's perfect to compliment me at an event like this, because if it gets to be too much for me, I can just say, hey, Chris, can you step in for me a little bit? So I think that it's such a fabulous thing that we are really welcoming that conversation now, and welcoming, what we might have formerly called diversity of thought, but also diversity of preference, and like how we add so much to the culture that our brains just work a little bit differently, and that's okay. And we can be really proud of that and the product that we put out and how we work. So, yeah.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
And you talk about, one of the important aspects of an inclusive workplace is supporting workers. And Liz, can you talk about just the importance of supporting workers and hiring? Or not we're going to talk about hiring labor, but just the importance of supporting workers, supporting your workforce.
Sure, absolutely. So, let's talk about DE&I then and call it what it is. We're really talking about employee well-being. And how are you using those strategies to create a strong culture within your workplace? And we always lead with data at Stork Club. Let's leave opinion out of it and focus on the data. And there's this fantastic study that was put out less than a year and a half ago, and it was a partnered study between Fortune and the Institute for Corporate Productivity. And I saw they have a booth here today. I quote them all the time. They interviewed 1,200 HR professionals worldwide. And what their study was able to show is that the higher performing organizations, and this is the best part, this is how they measure higher performing. It's in terms of revenue, profitability, market share, and employee retention. Those are all four things that are important to any organization. So the highest performing organizations worldwide were those that focused on building a really strong culture based on their diversity, equity, and inclusion strategies. And they took the study one step further, which was amazing, because they were able to then show companies that rely primarily on compensation as an employee retention tool actually experience higher employee attrition. So one of the things that we do whenever we're partnering with our customers, our prospects, is to help arm the teams with the data points that they need to then go in front of that decision maker who controls the budget. Because if you're looking to expand your benefit design in order to appeal to the broader employee base to create that strong culture, you need to be able to form the data points behind it that can help you position that. And the last one I'll leave you with, because we're all familiar with SHRM, they've estimated that the actual cost to a company to replace an employee who leaves is up to 200% that leaving employee's salary. So when you're making those business arguments, these are the types of data points that we try and provide all of you so that you can do that.
So you mentioned data, and I want to start with Carlin on this. Beyond traditional categories of diversity, how can a company build structure and data-supported initiatives to create spaces and opportunities for everybody?
Me.
Yeah.
So I think one of the things, I just want to take a bit of a step back with this, right? All right. If we are looking, I think the question is about how are we hiring people, right? And yes, we need to hire more people of color. Yes, we need to invite more people who have the skill set. It's not that they don't have the skill set, it's sometimes we're fishing in the wrong ponds, right? And we continue to fish in very specific ponds because of similarity bias. We just know who we know and it feels really comfortable for us. But one of the things about it, and I said this to the ladies before we came out, if you're inviting people into your organization and you want to have these beautiful data points, you're going to lose if you have not prepared your senior leadership or your leadership team. Point blank in the period. If you invite people in, and I'm going to give this person her flowers. Her name is Nzinga Shaw. When I went to a DEI conference, she said, if you're inviting people into a dirty house, they're not going to stay. I want you to think about this. If you go to someone's house and it's filthy, do you sit down? Do you take a glass of water from them? Mm-hmm. Are you trying to find your exit real quick? Yes, right? Similarly, if you are going to be intentional saying we are going to invite in more people who are people of color, who are not part of the dominant society, we're going to invite more women in, but we have not prepped our organization to be able to bring them in and bring them in for success. You're not going to, the data points don't matter, y'all. Mm-hmm. Right? Now, do we need to track it and see the success of it? Yes, because we want to be able to show how more diverse teams create better forms of innovation. We want to be able to show how diverse teams have created, beat their sales goals because they're able to go into the communities or different avenues that's not traditionally avenues that we go to, right? Because there's a lot of money out there. There's a lot of ways that we can go and pitch and get what have you. But in the more diverse workforce will allow that to happen. But the reason why I want to take that step back is you can have all the data points you want. Your retention rate for those people that you're inviting in will be abysmal. I've seen it, right? So I will say, before we start thinking about the data points, and I'm sure you guys will, I just want to make that point because I can't talk the whole time. You have to make sure you're preparing your leaders in order to welcome in this workforce so that they can be successful. The worst thing is, I will tell you, a lot of people of color already have imposter syndrome. So if you're coming into the workforce and the leader is not prepared for them and they then hit that point of the imposter syndrome, they're not going to perform, y'all. And there's, well, we hired this one Black person 10 years ago, they didn't perform. Oh, okay.
I hear that all the time.
Oh, okay. 10 years ago. Okay. That made sense, right? And I really want you to think about that because you're here as leaders. Really think about, is my organization ready to invite the people in and really develop them to be impactful and to really have the real action-oriented steps to take the company to the next level?
So Kitty, what do you, I'm sorry. Chris,
Yeah.
Chris, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think that's a really critical point. And Kitty, we talked about this in our prep. It's the difference between inclusion and belonging. And I don't know if that's what you were going to say, but feeling like you belong in an organization is totally different than like the I in the DE&I. And I'd like to see a more, an add to the acronym, if you will. But
I think the thing I wanted to add is a point that really is a nod to you and also to you when you say we have to prepare the workplace to receive folks that are diverse and to create an inclusive environment. And at IBM, we have 8 communities. They're not BRGs, they're communities. And it's how we invite people in, it's how we retain people, it's how we create that sense of belonging. And diversity is broad. So it's not just race or gender, it's also persons with diverse abilities, like you talked about, neurodiverse. It's also veterans. They come into the workforce with a totally different expectation and experience level. And acclimation level. So it's different for them. And we also welcome people who have an affinity to technology. So there are all types of diversity, but we create those communities. We have an SVP sponsor of those communities, so a senior leader that reports directly to the CEO. And then we have 2 co-chairs of those communities who are senior leaders. And then underneath that, a council, and then we have the ERGs, what we call BRGs, business resource groups. Not employee, they are there in service of the business. And so it helps us in terms of giving people a place to fit in and an opportunity to identify wherever that is. And there's intersectionality. People can belong to more than one community. So for us, that has been a huge, huge game changer.
And I would just very briefly add on that, and I was listening to each of the speakers kind of share their perspective. At the core of everything that they're all talking about, it starts with people, right? And so to your point, whether, metrics or strategy or whatever it may be, it really starts with people. And as I came into our organization 3 years ago, the first thing that I wanted to do was get to understand our people, because through understanding our people, you truly do get to understanding the culture and really identifying the areas that you need to pinpoint that need to be transformed. It's particularly important in an environment like the one that I operate in, where it is predominantly white men, predominantly people that are in operations roles. And so spending time 3 o'clock in the morning at the time in the midst of the pandemic on calls with the shift workers will yield you long-term results, because when people see you care about them, they will care about the work that you're doing. I would just also add that for us now, and I know Ernie is going to be talking about what's happening in the headlines, fast forward to 3 years later, now through our DEI, and we evolved to DEIB last year, so we are new with focusing on belonging, and we're loving it. But we are now beginning to see the residual effects of having made those relationship investments 3 years ago. Because while the external waters are really choppy, we now have brought along advocates and allies that have said, I'm on this journey with you.
Sure, and you mentioned something, and I want everyone to kind of answer this question, because you mentioned it, and you mentioned about, white men, or, their predominancy of them. And you mentioned about how to getting to know workers. So how do you all navigate as women of color, and as women, this world, when you're having to, all these, not hurdles, but, we both talked about white men are kind of running this.
Yeah. White men are crucial to diversity programs, isn't it? I talk about, again, the position of power. You have to use your position of power. We all have position of power, everybody in this room, don't we? And I think that that's the most important thing is finding the allies, educating them on how to use their position of power for the right reasons, right? And also not putting, something that's really important is not putting the onus on the diverse professional to be the educator, right? And empowering the white man, or so to speak, them to educate themselves. And I think that's also where it begins. So that's my opinion.
I'll take a step. So what I do is, you're going to be my BFF. You're my bestie now, right? And I make my besties all of the leaders that actually have, can actually create the influence, and they can actually make the things happen. So I'm making sure that the C-suite and those that I can bring along, the people who called me as soon as I got my role and said, how can I help? I said, you can help me, let me tell you how. The reason why that's important is the rooms that I'm not in, they're in, right? And I need to make sure that they're an advocate or full-on accomplice. I don't even want you to be an ally. I want you to be a full-on accomplice with me to get this work done. That you are here thinking about, and I'm giving you the tools, hey, this is something to be aware of. And when they are with you, they are with you. And sometimes I have no idea what they're saying, but then I hear people come, so this is who said this, and how can I get more involved? Thank you, right? Do not see them as someone who is outside of the work that you're doing. As the person who's running DEI, you cannot do this alone. You need all of the accomplices, all of the advocates with you. They need to be able to jump in the trenches, put on the war paint, and go out there with you. So you have to get them involved and stop seeing them as an obstacle and invite them in to be a part of the process.
Kitty?
I think for me, it goes back to when I took this job. I was really careful to look at the entire ecosystem and say, what needs to be threaded together in order to make an impact? And for me, it was leadership. So I own executive succession, selection, progression, all of our executive roles, all the way up to our SVP level. In addition, I own culture. diversity and inclusion are an important tenet of our culture. And so from my perspective, it was, how do I make all of this work? What's the ecosystem I need to impact in order to progress us as a company in terms of our culture, our commitment to inclusion, and driving the right business outcomes? So at the end of the day, I always go to the table with a value proposition, which is you will get better outcomes, to your point, profitability, margin, employee engagement, if you have a diverse and inclusive approach to work. And I think that always sells it. I am not selling anything. I am helping and enabling our business to meet our business objectives. And if you are new to this work, or if you've been doing it for a long time even, if you're not approaching it from that angle, I think you should strongly consider that. Because this is not about warm and fuzzies. This is not about our moral compasses. This is about the impact we can make to business outcomes. Now, is it the right thing to do? I happen to believe it is, right? But at the end of the day, what is important is the impact we can make to business.
And I always say that, you know, it's about the we, it's not about the me.
Exactly.
I think the attention is often focused on those of us that are sitting on this stage, but I always turn that around and say, this is really about us collectively. I mean, come on, whoever thought when I went to business school that I would actually be in a role where I had to help teach people how to get along? I mean, if we really were successful with DEIB, our roles would not exist. Right? And so the more we can focus on the collective we, and I love what was just said about tying it to strategy. Our 5 pillars of DEIB are firmly aligned to our corporate priorities and our enterprise strategy. Metrics blowing out throughout the wall. But it's bringing those people along and for them to understand this is really about you. This is not really about the DEIB office.
And I guess what I'll add to all of that is what every single person just spoke about is internal company communications and education. And that's where we try. I'm not selling anything either. I'm not a salesperson, but being able to explain why we have certain benefits and how it's going to impact not only your company culture, but also your medical spend over here, that is my job. And so one of the things that we've danced around but haven't actually attacked, and I've heard it mentioned once or twice, is BIPOC women. And we have a maternity mortality healthcare crisis going on in this country today. And what do we know? We know Medicaid has figured out that if there is an in-person doula in that room with the person who's in labor, outcomes are greatly improved. We're talking about reduced preterm births, reduced NICU stays, and saving people's lives, not just the person giving birth, but also the baby. And this is significantly impacting BIPOC women, and we need to start having open and honest discussions about why that is. Because in the United States, a white woman giving birth is 3 times more likely to die than her white counterpart in France. But a black woman in the United States, 6 times. 6 times more likely to die than our counterparts in other industrialized nations. And the National Bureau of Economic Research came out, and this is the part that's really heartbreaking. They show it has absolutely nothing to do with income, education, or access to quality health care. A wealthy, highly educated black woman with access to great health care, still 3 times more likely to die than a poor white woman in a rural community. That's a problem. We know it's a problem, and how are we going to start addressing that on a national level needs to be part of the discussion.
All right. So we have 3 minutes and 30 seconds left.
Sorry.
No, that wasn't a shot at you or anything. But I wish for this last question, I want to do kind of a speed round. So as you say, as a Jamaican, no long talking.
No long talking.
And I'm long talking with the question. So talk about, there's been a lot of attacks on diversity and inclusion in the corporate world. So quickly, just around, and I hate that we have to rush through this, but just how do we navigate through that as we going forward? Because you talked about how important it is, but all over we're hearing all these reports and seeing everything about cutting back and cutting back on it. So how do we navigate through that?
So the thing is, in the political scheme and the talking heads that you may see on the various news programs, they're not in your community and they're not in your business, right? They're not in your workplace. And here's the thing, like I said before, they're not making more baby boomers, they're not making more Gen Xers, they're not making more silent generations. What's coming up are the millennials are here, Gen Z is here, and they're the ones that we need to prepare for. They require that you have a real DEI strategy in place if you want your company to be successful. They won't come to you. You will lose talent. Do not listen to all this other stuff, you guys, because they will not come if you don't have the strategy and you have the probability of your company becoming blockbuster. You will not exist.
Reinforce your commitment to inclusion. I would say that's the first strategy in today's very challenging external environment. And then the second one is measure. Measure your impact. Be able to talk about that with your stakeholders, be able to hold people accountable for the outcomes you want to deliver. And again, I think the focus is on inclusion and really making the business case that innovation, creativity, and better business outcomes are tied to a more inclusive workplace.
I would start with being realistic. It may be that no matter what we do, they will still come. And so there's no perfect strategy, there's no perfect set of metrics. We've been talking about this for the last year. We've talked about it with our board of directors. My philosophy is, and we have support from the top of our organization, we are committed, we're gonna continue this work, but we're gonna be smart strategically. And so we've been taking preparatory steps over the last year in case we do get that onslaught.
Yeah, I'll just say talk is cheap, right? I mean, there are many reasons for many of the things that we're seeing going around. Be smart, recognize where people may be getting their information and educate. And so that's where having the data to support your strategic initiatives helps remove all of the opinion from the equation and then bring some of it to life. Like a woman who's coming back to work after having a newborn and needs a private place to breast pump her breast milk. Yeah, okay, that's DE&I. Are we against that? No, it's about recognizing the individual needs of each person at your organization so that you are creating an inclusive culture. Mm-hmm.
Doing what's right is not necessarily doing what's easy. And this work can be very hard. And it's very, very difficult to keep the needle moving, especially with all the talking heads and things like that. So just always, I guess, go back to what you feel is right for your business, your moral compass, and your strategy for your company, even if it's not easy.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, thank you all very much. Thank you all. Thanks. Please thank the panel. Carlin Gordon, Kitty Chaney-Reed, Cheryl Kern, Liz Pittenger. Did I say that right, Liz?
Yeah.
Yes, no. And Kristen Taylor. So give these smart executives a round of applause. And they'll be around. You guys are going to be around. So if you have any questions for them, they'll be around. You can have a conversation. So thank you all very much and have a good rest of the week, or rest of the day. Pick up the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, of which I'm employed. Thank you.